Good morning, folks, and welcome. I'm just going to do a few housekeeping agenda items before we get started. So if you do have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat or in the Q&A. We'll be taking questions at the end of the session. Or you can raise your hand to unmute yourself, but we'll be doing questions at the end. And I will introduce your speaker for today. Mike Haley is president and founder of Landmark Decisions, Inc., a Nova Scotia-based management consulting firm providing worldwide performance alignment facilitation, training, and implementation services. The prime focus of the company has been to supply guidance on the development of strategic, operational, and financial digital twin of an organization models, which help organizations improve their business decision-making capacity. And I will pass it over to Mike.
Great, thanks, Vimbaya. Welcome, folks. Happy you could join us today. So we're entitling this Mirror Your Business. It's really more about a blueprint, about the steps required for creating a digital twin of an organization. And our agenda today, I'm going to give you a little background on what digital twin and specifically digital twin of an organization is, if you're not familiar. As you can imagine, digital twins are related to technology, so we'll talk a little bit about technology. And I'd like to sort of start by showing you some of the benefits of doing DTO modeling before we get into how to build a DTO model. So you can kind of see where this is going. The methodology for creating DTOs can be mapped nicely to Lean and Lean Six Sigma specifically. So we'll talk about the overlap there, and then we'll finish off by talking about kind of how people interact with digital twins and what are some of those key benefits. And then we're going to kind of finish the last slide, I guess, to talk about some of the programs we have running with Digital Nova Scotia for both implementing and training around digital twins if people are interested in additional information. So, Vimbaya gave a little bit of background. We've been working in this space for over 30 years. 30 years ago, it wasn't called digital twin, of course. We were actually doing business process modeling, which is a key component of DTO. I started life as a chemist, moved into manufacturing, and then into consulting. And now we work pretty much exclusively with partners worldwide in helping them help their clients with digital twin of an organization. So what is digital twin? It's really, as you can imagine, a digital representation of a real world entity. And that could be an object, a process, an organization. Gartner, if you're not familiar with Gartner, they're the world's largest IT and advisory firm. And they're pretty much all the Fortune 500 companies would be clients. Most of the Western governments are clients. They use Gartner to help them understand technology trends and where they need to focus their kind of ITIM energies. So every year Gartner publishes what's called the Impact Radar. And this Impact Radar looks at four key areas around smart world, productivity, privacy, critical enablers. And then they look at the different things that are kind of coming down the pipe in terms of the time frame. The center here, the yellow being kind of what's happening now. For example, Gen AI, as we all know, is the hot issue of the day. And then also about the size of that market. So how many people are going to be using these types of technologies and so on. So you can actually see that digital twins, in terms of size and timeframes, are actually second to a Gen AI. And there will be some merger here, and there already is, with Gen AI into digital twins and so on. Gartner places this kind of squarely in the smart world. I'd kind of argue the point, and I'll leave it for your discretion to see if this kind of fits into the productivity revolution, because that's where we're seeing most of the applications, specifically of DTO, as opposed to digital twin. So Gartner goes on to define the class called DTO as this dynamic software model is around the whole business, the kind of stem to stern of the business, understanding how that business can respond to change and use its resources to support its products and services and delivering customer value. So it's really about improving decision making and through using advanced simulation for future state planning. And Gartner again predicts that it will be the largest and fastest growing component of there's really three types of digital twins: discrete, composite, and organizational. And they say organizational will be, together with composite, the largest market, growing to about almost $60 billion in the next 7 years. Gartner then breaks digital twin of an organization into 5 key building blocks. And they use this kind of navigation analogy to sort of look at where your destination is and how you're getting to that destination. And the key components here in the middle, the mapping, performance, and the situation, they define, and this is all their verbiage, key components. So modeling, business operating model, and being able to model that business, understanding your resources and how your resources map to your offerings, your outputs of the organization, being able to measure along the way, understanding the operational and financial indicators, things around being able to understand the cost and the value that you're bringing, and also using those models for scenario testing and predictive analytics. And then finally, taking those analytics and supporting better decisions. So understanding how your business works and then how to drive that business forward and be more productive and more cost effective. So those are all key components that DTOs need to enable to be kind of considered a DTO technology. Here in the lower part of this area, we have the different classes of technology that support DTO. So there is really still no, one solution for DTO. They cover a wide range of solution sets, so some of which may do portions of this, or some that may do maybe most of these. And we're going to talk about some examples of that. So in their latest market guide, so Gartner again publishes these guides to talk about the trends in IT and the different types of technologies, and they usually give some illustrative technologies. So you can see there's I think about 12 different technologies here, and this shows how those technologies play into that classification of technologies on that previous slide. And you'd be interested to know that there's a couple of Canadian vendors here in the space. So Interfacing Technologies out of Montreal have been a long time player in enterprise business process analysis and managing what they call strategy to execution. And then there's another Canadian, it's kind of a Danish-Canadian combination. So this tool called CBP Software has been built on what's called the QualiWare Enterprise Architecture and BPM solution. And what CBT brings to the QualiWare suite is the simulation capability. Again, another key component of DTO. So there's other IT advisory firms. So Quadrant Knowledge Solutions are now called KQS. That's a mouthful. They actually do an evaluation of these technologies, and they look at the technology excellence. How well is that IT solution architected, and user interfaces and kind of usability. And then what impact it has for the customers, what benefits are the customers that are going. So obviously the leaders, this area up here is where you'd want to be as a technology vendor. So no surprise, some of the largest software companies in the world play in this space. So SAP, IBM, Software AG. But there are some specialists here as well. So iGraphics, for example, an American company, and QualiWare, this one I mentioned before. This has become kind of our tool of choice for implementing DTOs. I'm going to take you through some examples. If you're interested in a bit more detail around that, there are a couple of links here, and we can make this presentation and those dynamic links available to you post webinar, or I can put them in the chat if people are interested. So I thought I'd just begin by showing you some illustrations of where DTO, specifically this collaborative business planning, where we've been involved with our partners in implementing these DTO solutions. So the first one I'd like to talk about is Passport Canada. So I'm sure some of you were aware, had a bit of a crisis after the travel restrictions were lifted following the pandemic. And created quite a backlog of passports that needed to be processed. So we were asked to come in and help model the business, and we modeled basically looking at the two large mail hubs that we have in Canada for the mail-in passports that you do, or the in-person through either Service Canada or Passport Canada sites. This tool is using what's called a value stream, and this is based on a in-person office situation. So obviously, if you've gone through that process, you'd understand some of these. So you basically get welcomed and you get screened into which area, which passport officer would process you, depending on the complexity of your application. Complexity is driven by two factors. It's driven by the type of passport, so whether it's a renewal, which are typically fairly straightforward, whether it's an adult, and then if it's a new adult or an existing kind of knowledgeable adult with regard to the information that's available, or then a child, which are typically the more complicated based on custody issues and another thing with regard to children. So the different types of passports and the complexity within each of those personal files will drive the amount of work requirement that needs to be done as it moves through this process. So value stream mapping is really good for understanding things are called processing times. How long do things on average take to do, and what are the steps involved? But also helps define where rework is occurring. So that was a big focus for Passport, because obviously they were capacity constrained. So identifying where waste was happening in the process and working to eliminate that waste to free up capacity to handle more of the backlog. That was really the focus of that. So value stream is usually a great first step to understand the process. And if we drill then down, I'm just going to pick this little area as an illustration. This is around kind of the printing process for the passport after it's all been kind of approved and the security done on it and so on, goes to the printing. And so the tool that we're using now, the CBP DTO, basically allows you to use what's called activity-based planning and drill into the activity detail associated with that particular process. So here we have the passport printing. We have all of the things, assembling the job and actually running the print through the printers, and then handling, rejects that come out. So misformed passports, jams, things like that. Printer downtime. So these are two areas of non-value added activities that could be potentially optimized. Passports then go to QC, quality control. Additional kind of spoils are identified there, which means passports have to be reprinted, and then ultimately the mail out. So breaking these components in, these purple circles represent actually connections to resources and other activities necessary to support the process. This is just kind of one page, a drill in on the entire process. So there'll be multiple pages, and they're connected through these little purple circles. So we can actually see, things like the total number of passports, and because activity-based planning allows us to tie expenses and costs into the resource structure, we can look at the cost flows, the financial flows, and understand what the cost. So again, this is all illustrative data. It's not real data. But on average, we can say a printed passport costs about $7. So that fee that we all pay as Canadians, some of that is obviously it's done on a cost recovery basis, and then they can understand where those cost components are. But probably more importantly, from a resource point of view, understand where are there errors, downtimes, rejects happening. How can they eliminate those or reduce those to free up additional capacity to handle more passports? And that was really the focus of this work. All of this information and most of these DTO models, I mean, not necessarily exclusive to the CBP solution, all of these new calculated insights and results can be brought forward into BI, business intelligence dashboards. So this is an example continuing on from that print story that I had on the previous slide, where we actually look at the selection of those data verification, the print and the QC. And now we can actually see by classifying these types of activities, how many are value added, non-value, but needed, and non-value that are truly waste. And we can track the amount of time that is spent on each of these activities. We can graphically show that. And we can tie that out actually to the volumes of these different activities. So now people can focus on where, the opportunities lie, as far as maybe in this case, reducing about 1.5 FTEs if possible, or freeing up 1.5 FTEs to do more value added work. So this is kind of the benefit and the widespread use of what a DTO model can provide. So another example I'd like to share is one a little closer to home here in Nova Scotia with what's called Nova Scotia Crown Lending, more commonly known as the Farm Loan Board and the Fisheries Loan Board. And they offer kind of provincially backed loans to kind of higher risk farmers and fishers at more attractive rates and payment terms than commercial banks. They had a number of challenges with regard to legacy acts and regulations because it's a provincially run crown corporation, historical business processes, and kind of keeping up with kind of the state of loan processing. Their processing systems were a bit out of date, and they had significant issues in labor capacity and workload distribution across the organization. So they actually conducted a full lean Kaizen event. About 80% of their organization attended the event. And one of the first steps was to lay out this value stream. And I appreciate this is kind of small. And really what I wanted to show more is that they broke this into what we call swim lanes to look at each different labor role and what activities they had, but more importantly, where the handoffs were. Because the handoffs are typically where wait times happen and in the total calculation of the total lead time. And that was an issue as well. It was taking almost 4 months on average to process a loan. So obviously, if a fisherman, is keen to, do something on his boat or with regard to licensing, or a farmer wants to do new equipment or whatever, waiting 4 months is a problem because their need is much more urgent than that. So they needed to really understand the full process and the sequencing of what happens. And then again, same idea, start with value stream mapping and then drill in with this activity-based planning module. So we can actually now start looking at, so this is for what's called the fish loan team. What were the component activities that they did? And then how much resource is required for each activity, such that we can determine the total capacity and total utilization of those resources and understand how those resources are distributed. Those resources, because they're related to the costs of the organization, the expenses, those costs will flow through the organization and through the activities. So we can actually start to identify what are the unit costs and total costs for different types of activities. And that has an impact, obviously, as well on budgets. And particularly, this is granted public sector. There are fees associated with loan processing. It's supposed to be done on a cost recovery basis. So what was identified is that certain types of loans were more expensive than the fees and others may be underpriced. So that becomes important in a public sector when you're charging service fees. So that's why costing was important in that area. Next area is in healthcare. So we worked in cooperation with one of our partners, Barrington Healthcare here in Halifax, to do a prototype for long-term care. So we worked with a long-term care facility, and here model one, I'd say it's a medium size, about 150 beds, with about an $18 million a year budget. And this one page I'm showing here is around the resources. That's where the cost is at. So, the facility itself, broken into the different types of rooms, the kind of the common areas, the kitchen. We have some variable resources, medical supplies, housekeeping supplies, obviously food and dietary supplies, utilities. Those are all considered variable resources. So we see we actually use different symbology, or this tool uses different symbology to represent those. And then the labor components. And the real focus here was on the frontline care providers. So the RNs, the LPNs, licensed practical nurses, and the CCAs, continuing care assistants, that provided frontline, again, support for the residents. So by understanding how many of each were available, we could actually look at utilizations. We understood what the overtime requirements were for those. And now we can simulate how the work is done. So we broke the activities into 3 types of components: medical care, non-medical care, and care support. And these are the unique activities associated. So if we look at medical care and we look at the distribution, who's providing, in this case, medications. So typically that's done more by the RN, so 70% of the time by RNs, 30% of the time by LPNs. So a higher demand on the RNs, which is going to have an impact on their overall capacity and utilization. We calculate or determine what are the average times for medication administration. And if we look at wound care, for example, more done by the LPNs, higher time using a different type of resource. So again, mapping all of this, and then we basically pull those down to the classification of residents. So they classify the residents by frailty. And in this prototype model, we basically looked at a high care need resident, a moderate care, and a standard care resident, each of which will require different amounts of these activities to support. All of that information can be processed. So the DTO model becomes, think of it as a bit of an engine that takes data and converts it into new insights and new information, and which can be then pushed out through dashboards, management dashboards. In this case, what we're showing is the 3 types of residents, and then how much of each kind of care component goes into supporting each of these types of residents, including how many hours of total time is done by each of the labor categories, which then gives us the ability to understand our cost segmentation around the amount of costs that go towards each type and the unit costs. And this became really insightful as well for the facility, because the province ultimately funds long-term care on a per bed basis, not on a per resident basis. So if a long-term care facility has higher number of high care patients, then it's obviously going to be more costly for them to support those patients than having more standard care. Unfortunately, the long-term care facility doesn't get the privilege of selecting their customers, probably nor should they, but they have to do this balancing act with resources and costs and budget across that. So this was very insightful for them to provide that information. And the last example I'll share comes out of manufacturing. This is with a company in St. John, New Brunswick called Crosby Foods. You may be more familiar with them as Crosby's Molasses. They just had a brand name change within the last year. So they're about 145-year-old, 5th generation consumer packaged good company. And in addition to molasses, they actually do a variety of their own drink crystals, and they're big co-manufacturers for other, I'll call them no-name drinks and Jello products that you'll see in supermarkets like Sobeys or maybe in the US with Best Buy. And they also package all of the Canadian requirement for hot chocolate and iced tea with the largest food company in the world. I'll let you do the research on who that is. They have 10 production lines. And this illustration here is of one of the pouch filling lines. So this would be for example, for drink crystals or for hot chocolates. So basically, materials come into the production area from the warehouse. If I follow the arrows here, they go through a machine that actually kind of fills them with the mix ingredients. There's web rolls, which actually form the pouches. We've got some supporting activities around what's needed to maintain that web roll and remount new rolls when they run out. They ultimately then get packed into cases, and those cases get palletized, and things move back as finished goods into the warehouse. So that's kind of the key process flow. Around that, we have all of again, these purple circles representing line one packers, line one operators that tie out to the resources available on the production line. So we can actually look at how much resources needed and what those utilizations are. We can see there's variable resources here for the raw materials, the ingredients, the web rolls forming the pouches, the cases. But as important is looking at these non-value add activities. In fact, they actually looked at, total cost of quality. And, in total cost of quality in manufacturing, one of the key things are internal and external failure costs. So you want to catch those things early by doing prevention or appraisal up front and embedding that. So product testing, for example, or doing, kind of safety and control paperwork are considered, appraisal costs that will hopefully help reduce downtime and internal failures. We've identified those here. We can do some color coding here to bring these out. So pouch reworks of pouches that are misformed and have to be reprocessed and so on. That's obviously a cost, about $8,600 in relation to a total of $200,000 for the total production run. And then breakdowns, obviously another costly component because they take away resource availability of the production line and availability of the people working on those production lines. So we want to be able to capture that. And again, because this does costing as well, we can actually see what the total cost of these particular non-value added activities are. We can also use what are called variables, so that you may recognize some of these as common production. So, the production rate of a production line, the average size, which impacts the amount of changeovers, how long a changeover takes. So these are common manufacturing metrics that can be brought into these DTO models, such that we can now flex those for future state planning to say if we could speed up the line, if we could reduce the changeover times by increasing our batch or production size, if we can reduce breakdowns by doing maybe preventative maintenance, we can evaluate all these, understand their impact on capacity, and then understand their impact on costs. So again, this tool that we're familiar with, this DTO tool, basically all of this can be brought into a web interface. So wider cross-section across the organization can interact with these models, understand what they are, and by, kind of clicking around here, can actually see. So this one, we're actually focusing on the pouch rework, which is this activity. So it tells me how many pouches are reworked, what the actual cost of that was, total cost and unit cost. But I can also see those costs in terms of the financial details, where those costs are coming from, how much of that is wasted electricity or hourly labor time or benefits or whatever. So we can trace all of these through these DTO models, including how much resource and the actual total volume of those resources. It becomes very interactive in that fashion. And then again, as we saw before, using BI dashboards, we can bring out this information for wider consumption and understanding in the organization. In this case, showing the overall cost of good quality, poor quality, and the total cost of quality, and actually running scenarios to test, well, what could we do about that? Could we change our product mix? Should we do some more operator training? Maybe we want to get rid of a customer that's costing us too much money. We can actually see what the impact is on operation, both operationally and financially, by using these dashboards. Okay, so I thought that might be helpful before we jump into kind of how you build them. In summary, DTO models really take the business operating model, how your business is done as defined by your resources, your activities and your processes, and your outputs, be they products and or services. It brings operational and financial data, typically collected in maybe ERP systems if you're in manufacturing, for example, labor data, your financial data, certainly, and every organization certainly has financials that can be fed into these models around the business operating structure. So build the structure, feed the data in, and then start looking at new insights with regard to operational and financial flows, the ability to run simulations, understand where the constraints and bottlenecks exist in the process, and probably as importantly or more importantly, finding resolution for those particular bottlenecks, and then pushing this information out to a wider cross section of managers and executives for understanding the process and making better business decisions with that. So that's really what a DTO model. Again, we're showing you with this quality-aware CBP, but all DTO models would kind of have similar kind of benefit and kind of core input to their modeling capabilities. So let's talk about the techniques for building these DTO models and so on. So quick show of hands. I'm interested. How many folks would have some knowledge or experience in Lean? If you can just give me a hands up, maybe let me know if Lean is a commonly understood term. Couple there, yeah, okay, great. Thank you. So I'm going to focus on what's called the DMAIC process within what's called Lean Six Sigma. There's a variety of flavors of Lean. Lean Six Sigma is a much more data intensive and very then amenable to DTOs because we need data to create a DTO model. So DMAIC process is around define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So there's basically these 5 components of DMAIC. DMAIC was actually popularized by Motorola, who actually adopted some of the techniques coming out of the Toyota production system, which was considered kind of the earliest genesis of Lean. And it's an evolved form really of what you may know as the plan, do, check, act. And it's really a loop. So you never finish, you're always continuing. And this is where around the concept of continuous improvement. So we're going to use this as a way to map what we use as far as the steps to create a DTO. So it's a very sound methodology in that regard. What's also interesting about Lean Six Sigma specifically and the DMAIC process, that there are a wide variety of tools and techniques that come in I'll call it the Lean toolkit. Not all these would necessarily be used in every Lean implementation, but what is interesting is that DTO models play a component, a supporting role, shall we say, in many of these techniques, the ones here in green. Key to that is value stream. Most Lean implementations, certainly ones I've been involved in, will usually, I won't say start, but value stream mapping is a core component of understanding process flow and understanding the flow and the challenges in flow with regard to value, non-value added rework, and so on. So they become the targets for optimization work and process improvement work. So if we use this around an 8-step methodology, so this is an approach that we've been using for many years now to help partners and their clients implement a DTO. So it basically starts by looking at the define phase. So what are the key strategic goals? Where do you want to take these models? Why are you doing the modeling? What is your business all about today? That's understanding kind of the business operating model. Steps 3 to 5 are all around the measurement. So understanding the processes, the detail in the processes, like the diagrams that I showed earlier, and using diagrams. So actually creating a diagram to understand that flow, and that diagram becomes essential for defining the data requirements necessary to populate your DTO model. So instead of collecting data kind of all over the place, it has a structure now because you're populating this DTO diagram. Then the analyze portion, this is where you start to introduce a DTO software type where you actually bring the data and the diagrams into a tool that allows you to run algorithms to calculate flows, to calculate utilizations, to calculate costs, and then use that new information to help analyze your business process with the ultimate goal of improving those processes, to have those levers now in the business that allow you to flex, operational and financial data to understand the future state, potential future state of the business. And then we wrap this all around with a control approach. So making sure that DTO, those initial DTO models become embedded in the kind of the management decision-making process, are updated with regard to data and changes that exist. People are trained and understand how these DTO models work and the benefits of those models. So I'm just going to drive a little down into the detail of each of these steps, but I thought it would be kind of fun to play, I'll call it business management guru trivia. So I'm going to give you a couple of hopefully famous quotes, and let's see if you in your chat there, chat stream, if anybody can come up with the people who have said these quotes that kind of impact each of these DMAIC processes. So again, in step 1 and step 2, it's really all about beginning with the end in mind. Anybody want to have a go at whose quote that might be? Give you a hint. He's written many books that begin with the 7 habits of. Does that help? Okay, that is a fellow called Stephen Covey. He's since passed away. His son has actually picked up the mantle and has written some other 7 habit books. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was his first book, but it was all about beginning with the end in mind. That's really what we're doing with step 1 and step 2. We're understanding what are those critical strategic or business issues that need immediate short-term attention, because if you're going to build these DTO models, you want to answer questions. So are you looking at new products or new services, or maybe rationalizing the products and services that you are offering? Same thing with customers. So you have competitive challenges. Do you have costing or pricing pressures, maybe budget pressures, particularly if you're in the public sector? Understand your current state, your resources, how dollars are spread, what outputs and timeframes are necessary to build this model. These models are typically created for a particular time period, so it could be a monthly model. In the case of that Passport Canada work, that was a weekly model because they wanted to, increase or reduce that backlog in a timely fashion. So weekly planning was important. And then making sure you understand what resources are available internally to actually conduct them on. You want to resource these projects properly with your internal resources and your budgets, and what time frame is realistic to implement your initial DTO model. So that's steps 1 and 2. Steps 3 and 5 kind of play on from there to understand now how you do a process analysis. So here's the famous quote. Anybody want to have a thought on that one? What gets measured gets managed. Is it familiar? Hopefully. Okay, the hint on this one is he is considered the it's a bit of a 20th century one. So they're considered the father of business management as a discrete discipline of study. So this is what started the whole idea, things like that. Fantastic, Drucker. Thank you, Christy. Indeed, Peter Drucker. So some of the key components that ties to is mapping your business process with regard to the process flows to deliver your outputs, but more importantly, looking at the resources necessary to do those and using diagrams, because visual, picture's worth 1,000 words, literally, in this case. And then those diagrams become the foundation, the roadmap for collecting the data, both operational and financial data, to feed the models. So by data, we mean things like the output volumes. How many products do you produce on a monthly or weekly basis? What are the revenues for selling those products? And these can be tied to services, of course, as well. What are the activities necessary to support those? So in terms of the processing time, that's the hands-on time, the lead time, how long does it take to start and finish a particular activity? And then the wait times, those times in between the activities, like I showed with Nova Scotia Crown Lending. So what are those, and then what are the consumption rates with regard to the resource requirements? So understanding how much resource is available, how they are consumed will allow you then to look at resource utilization and ultimately resource costs that can flow through these whole models. So those are some of the key components when we kind of map out, steps 3 to 5. Once that's done, we create a model. So we kind of bring this to a software, and we most importantly validate these models. But here's our quote. This one may be a little more obtuse. The goal is to turn data into information and information into insights. I'll give you the hint. This is a person who broke the glass ceiling, shall we call it, at one of the largest tech companies in the world. And she actually became the first woman to lead a Fortune 20 company. Any guesses? Okay, it's actually Carly Fiorina, who was the former CEO of HP, and she oversaw the acquisition of Compaq that HP did to kind of take them to the head of the PC computer market back probably 20 plus years ago now. So this is what all this is about, is turning this data that we've collected into using an engine, the DTO engine, validating that the results of that engine are useful, and then gathering new insights on that. So obviously the selection of a DTO software that allows you to map these operational financial flows, to run these calculations, and then compare those against historical data. So we want to make sure the model is actually truly representing what happened historically. Therefore, we can then use the model plan for the future. In doing so, we want to understand the validation with regard to the, I'll call them reasonableness limits. So, this is not an accounting system, for example. We want approximately correct information to support management decision making. So this provides new insights with regard to the utilization. What is the impact? What is the cost and output impact of having idle capacity on your equipment or your people? We can get to things like fully loaded costs, and then understand really profitability analysis, which is now process driven and data driven. And then last is the optimize and plan for the future. Sorry, step 8 ties to that. And this one is, the quote is, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we use when we created them." So the hint is here is not normally considered a business guru, but still considered one of the most intelligent men who ever lived. Any guesses on this one? Okay, it's actually Albert Einstein, who's a physicist, but just kind of like this quote about understanding a need to change your thinking with regard. So having a DTO model that provides these new insights and new ahas associated with the business allows you to change that thinking, allows you to maybe overcome those challenges. So by running scenarios and doing what if planning, you can actually test process improvement ideas that come from the front line or through brainstorming or from employees. You can explore things like alternate resourcing strategies, maybe redistributing roles and responsibilities, looking at risk management, doing sensitivity analysis, understanding the impact of regulatory change, that we're all impacted by sustainability guidelines and changes that need to happen. What is the impact on your business, and what are the cost impact and resource impact on the business? So that's all around the improve. And then finally on the control, last attempt here with the business gurus. A bad system will beat a good person every time. So this gentleman is considered the father of total quality management. Was actually an American that went to Japan to help them reestablish. It was after the Second World War, which ultimately led to the develop of lean and what's called the Toyota production scene. So yes, good selection there. W. Edwards Deming, absolutely correct. And in our control, really what this is all about is making sure these DTO models that are created become, again, embedded. So making sure the data is integrated and can be readily automated and updated. There's sufficient documentation around the models, training around how the model works and the tool that is selected and using that. And it's really all about promoting this kind of cross-disciplinary collaboration in how a model is used, and supporting. So everybody has this, I'll call it one version of the truth in how the business operates. So to summarize, DTO models, how are they used across from a user point of view? Basically, process owners will work with specialists that whatever DTO technology is selected can help build these models, and then work with the data suppliers that may be owners of different operational and financial data systems to feed those models to get these new flows and to validate these new flows, make sure the models are accurate, so they can then be used for analysis. Sometimes what we'll call the planners. They can run scenarios, understand where constraints exist in the process, and overcome those constraints through process improvement initiatives. And then push this information all out, typically through a web interface, to managers and executives that now can have those new insights and help support the feedback and the decisions associated with it. So those are kind of how DTO models should be used in an organization and basically touch everybody in the organization. So in summary, DTO models should support multifunctional business decisions. So it's not just the senior executives. Decisions happen throughout the organization by process owners, by different functional roles, sales and marketing, HR, production, but also in terms of strategic decisions. So looking at investment decisions, new products and services, sensitivity risk analysis. The example I walked you through with Crosby's, for example, the investment decision, they actually used that to justify a new robotic arm that allowed them to speed up their case packing operation on one of their production lines. Also used it for looking at new products and new service offerings to supply to the marketplace. Operational insights with regard to HR planning, capacity management, operational efficiencies, and basically making the process better. and then understanding the financial impacts. So the costing, again, back to the Crosby example there, and why they actually started the project was to understand what the costing and pricing sensitivity was of their products. And they found that using traditional accounting methods for costing, they were over and under costing different products. So this allowed them to get at the true cost, which for long-term contracts with clients was very important. So lots of benefits by having your, I'll call it business in a box. And one of the biggest benefits is having that common understanding that can be used collaboratively. Everybody kind of singing off that same song sheet. So if people are interested in a bit more detail, there's a few programs that we're working with Digital Nova Scotia on. If you're in the manufacturing environment, we have also partnered with what's called NGen, which is Canada's organization for leading advanced manufacturing in Canada. So they've provided a grant to work with us to have a highly subsidized project in creating a DTO model for SME manufacturers. So that's available on the on Digital Nova Scotia website. We are taking applications for that for SME manufacturers. Would welcome working with you and with Dalhousie University. Actually, we bring a industrial engineer co-op student to assist the client in implementing that. And then in January, somewhat as part of this DTO program for manufacturing, we're going to be running a 4 half-day workshop on that 8-step methodology, all geared around a case study for manufacturing and the steps involved in applying that in a manufacturing environment. So it's a chance to get a little hands-on, going through all of these 8 steps with that case study, and getting a little hands-on with the technology and understanding the benefits and really how it all works. So. Okay. I know that was a fast ride through the world of DTO. So then Bio will maybe throw it open for any questions. Happy to answer those.
Hi, Mike. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat or raise your hand and we can unmute you.
Are people seeing applicability for DTO modeling in their environment? Again, don't have a real good feel sort of what areas people are coming out of. It basically, as I tried to show with some of these examples, can be applied certainly in the service industry, in the public sector, in manufacturing. Over our years, we've had the good experience to be able to apply it pretty any industry. Because really, at the end of the day, business is business. Business is around process. It's around consuming resources. It's around supporting your outputs. So understanding how the business works is fundamental for any DTO.
I don't think we have any questions, but if you do, feel free to reach out to Mike, and he can
Oh,
answer.
there is one here in the Q&A. So Sam asks, curious if you've ever done any marketing mix modeling. I'm not sure if DTOs fit for our organization, but that is a term I've seen in our industry for helping understand their investment. So I would say, again, I'm not familiar with the term marketing mix. But I'm guessing it's related to different strategies for promoting the products or services that are being offered. If that kind of makes sense, then certainly you could trace the resource requirements, both internal and external, i.e., maybe purchase services or whatever, required around different marketing campaigns, and then using data to look at the kind of the benefits of that with regard to uptake in sales in different channels, You could actually simulate that. So you could take your ideas around which marketing approach would work. You could model that and look at the impact on, and then actually, prove that out, I guess, over time, looking at how those, kind of sales go over time. If that indeed is what marketing mix is about. Any other final questions? Okay, I've got left my contact information there. By all means, feel free to send me a note if you have any other questions. Happy to answer those at any time. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike, for taking time out of your day to take us through the blueprint of how to apply DTO to our organizations. And I think that everybody can take something away from this session. And thank you all for coming, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
thanks, folks.